The world's most advanced cold wallet for the new generation of cryptocurrency lovers, Descent. Quickly verify full transaction details on large OLED display. Save valuable time using 4 buttons for fast operations. With Descent's fingerprint authentication.
What happens with the SEC at that time? Are they pretty much done with possibly responding or trying to launch a counter at that time? Is the case over, or what's our next step or next risk?
All right, well, let's look at possible outcomes, right? So let's take the first outcome possible is that the SEC gets an outright win. I know you want to start it with a positive, but that's the first negative result, right? Yeah. And then a second option is that Ripple gets a flat out victory. And then, of course, there's a third option where there's a partial summary judgment granted in part and denied in part, and that could be a split. And then finally, there's a fourth outcome that it's a split, but also a jury trial could necessarily be needed for certain issues. The only 2 issues that I foresee a jury trial where the judge could say this particular issue needs to be decided by a jury is if we get to the fair notice defense, right? Ripple even said in their papers, Paul, that the fair notice defense, whether or not Ripple received adequate and fair notice, that's a jury question for the jury to decide. Now, hopefully the judge doesn't get that far, right? Because hopefully she never rules on fair notice defense because it's an outright victory. So back to your question, though. Let's say that there's either an outright Ripple win, or the judge says that Ripple offered an unregistered security in 2013, 2014, and fines them for that, but that today ongoing and future sales of XRP are not considered securities. Either one of those are a great victory. And so then the question is, what would the SEC appeal the decision? Would they then want to go to the Second Circuit? And I don't think they would. Right. The interesting question, the most interesting question about all this, Paul, is what you're getting at, which is, okay, John, what happens on the ground? If Ripple wins or they're held to only violate the law in some very early years, some very beginning sales, but today's XRPs and future XRP sales are not securities, what happens? Well, we would see some price appreciation, one would expect. And whether or not Coinbase, Crypto.com, Kraken, Binance US,
get the relist.
The question is, what do they do? Do they relist? If the SEC doesn't appeal the decision, then the law of the land is Judge Torres, and you would think that they would relist, right? Especially in today's environment where you have the SEC and Gary Gensler saying, there's so many tokens or securities. If you've got clarity on XRP and there is no appeal and Judge Torres' decision that XRP is not a security, if that's the law of the land, then of course you would expect those exchanges with that kind of clarity to relist XRP. And so that's the good news, I think, if it happens. I would doubt that the SEC would appeal a decision if they get a split win. The early sales are securities, but today's sales are not, because Ripple has a really good argument on appeal, and conservatives like the Supreme Court are very conservative, and they could go back and revisit Howey and put the SEC out of crypto completely. And at least with XRP, if they lose, they can turn around and say, hey, that's just XRP. And, facts and circumstance. You always hear Gary Gensler, regulators, utter those words, facts and circumstances. Facts, meaning each crypto is different. Was it an ICO? Was it not an ICO? What were the facts and circumstances surrounding the sales? And so I think that if that happens, it'll be good news for all of us who are XRP holders.